Hello there, still Sid Moustache here again, and I'd like to chat to you about two very different styles of steel string acoustic guitars. The flat top, oh yes, and the arched or carved top. Yeah. And we of course tend to associate the flat top with Martin guitars in the United States at least, and Gibson guitars for the arched top. Now the flat top goes back in history many centuries, probably developed from Moorish instruments and the Moorish influence in Spain, hence the flamenco and European classical designs, which are still of course very much in use today. However, in North America, the lightly built gut-strung European guitar didn't fare very well in the extremes of temperatures and environments. Steel strings appeared in the early 20th century. They were stronger and more durable than gut, but they exerted a lot more tension on the instruments, and lots of instruments were spoiled by that extra tension. So they made the guitar louder, but they also required a heavier build. Now, although a little slow to adopt steel strings by about 20 odd years, Martin designed a stronger X bracing. Instead of the fan struts or the ladder struts, they designed a cross here with smaller braces to make guitars both bigger and stronger and able to take, incidentally, those steel strings. Gibson went in another direction. Mr. Gibson, him very self, was obsessed with making instruments, primarily mandolins, like they made violin family instruments. And so the mandolin, if anything, was even more fragile than the guitar, especially the round-backed ones of Italian origin. And so he designed these with carved tops. Originally it was all one piece of wood on the back and sides, but that proved rather wasteful. But had a carved top, and very importantly a carved back, and it made this small instrument far more robust and, of course, as we know, the F-5 mandolin, which came out in the early 20s, was probably the peak of design of the mandolin to date. He also turned his mind to guitars, which were hovering around in the back of the mandolin orchestras of the time. We're talking about the 1900s, early 1900s to 1920. And so he looked at making guitars in the same way. And that ultimately led, I don't know whether ultimate is the right word, to this guitar. This is a genuine Gibson guitar, made in 1934, with a 16-inch wide body. You can see slightly more narrower than, for instance, the equivalent Martins. I don't think equivalent is appropriate either. And the difference, of course, is that we're pushing down on the carved top as opposed to pulling up on the flat top. There were many socio-economic changes that affected the development of the guitar, especially in Europe, with a couple of world wars to cope with, and in the States. But I'd like to mention one specifically: technology. Radio, talking pictures, microphones, and transportable recording systems. these made music far more accessible to the people. In fact, that's where the term country music comes from, because a recording system that could be put in the back of a large car and taken to anywhere in the United States to record people sitting on their front porch stoops or in little church halls or whatever, was what they called country music, because it was recorded in the country, rather than the large classical music studios of the few big cities that had them. Anyway, the other thing that that enabled, and we know this from our own experience, that popular music, even through our lifetimes, has seen many different fads, and they change frequently. And from ukulele and mandolin orchestras to the Hawaiian craze and blues and jazz and swing and Dixieland and things like that, each of them had an effect on the guitar, because it was a matter of supply and demand. Due to those technological advances, acoustic music blossomed from the barrooms and the barbershops and the street corners to church halls to theatres and auditoriums. Acoustic instruments could be heard by larger and larger audiences, and the recordings could be bought by larger and larger numbers. New Orleans bands customarily use a 4-string plectrum banjo, but during the 1920s and 1930s, a kind of civil war broke out between swing music and Dixieland or New Orleans music, and the banjo players lost their seats in the bands unless they could change to a guitar. Now, the lovely flat top guitars of the time didn't really do the job, because as beautiful as their sound was, as a rhythm instrument, they didn't really compete with lines of saxophones and trumpets and things like that, despite the fact that Martin introduced the OM orchestra model, initially a modified O size, which was around from 1929 and discontinued in 1933, then replaced in 1934 by the modified Dreadnought with 14 frets, etc. Neither of them filled the need in dance bands. The archtop filled the bill. The former plectrum banjo players were accustomed to only 4 strings, and they wanted a long neck, hence the 14 frets and all that, and a thin banjo type neck. And they kind of adapted their banjo playing plectrum style to 6 strings by not using all 6 strings. So instead of doing that, they'd more likely be doing only using 2 to 4 strings. And this was exemplified wonderfully by a guy called Freddie Green, who played in the Count Basie Orchestra for many, many years, always unamplified. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Technology also allowed smaller acoustic bands to reach a greater audience, and the flat top, mostly modified into the rhythm guitar with 14 frets as I mentioned, and the thinner fretboard, found its home in old-time, bluegrass, country and folk genres as a rhythm guitar more than anything. Now, you'll have observed that my guitars are mostly of the 12 fret type, and that is because I play a lot of melody lines in my playing style, and I've got very fat fingertips, and so the wider necks suit me better. But that's a personal choice. The flat top guitar moved from being primarily a fingerstyle instrument to a rhythm instrument. And various styles of chording, strumming, flat picking developed. All this development of the acoustic guitar stopped pretty quickly when magnetic pickups emerged in the mid to late 30s. They were first applied to Hawaiian lap steels and then to dance band archtops. Now, is this archtop, this carved top archtop guitar, an acoustic or an electric? So when people speak of archtop guitars, they often mean guitars that resemble this in shape and look, but are in fact electric because they have an internal fence post glued to the top of the carved, or more likely pressed top, yeah, so that you can screw pickups onto it. This, of course, helps kill the feedback from pickups, but of course it also kills the acoustic sound. And some will say, oh yes, but you can still hear a sound. Yeah, you can hear a sound by just having 6 strings on a solid guitar, but you know, they are electric guitars. Now, of course, flat tops didn't escape electrification either. And you know, you can get things, Gibson brought out a J160 at one point, which the Beatles used, which had a laminated top which didn't resonate, and a magnetic pickup on the top. Magnetic pickups never really worked on acoustic style guitars, but there were other options such as piezo's and transducers and internal microphones. Frankly, I've tried them all, and I'd rather play in front of a good microphone myself. And that's what acoustic guitars are about. So anyway, that's old Andy's view of these two types of guitars. There was another type developed in this time and for similar purposes, the resonator guitar, but I think that deserves a video of its own. So anyway, what do you think of these types of guitars? And do you think I've got it wrong? Do you disagree with me? Would you like to add something that maybe I've missed out? I welcome comments, queries and questions. I always try to respond to comments and questions, so in the meantime, if you have been, thanks for watching. Bye.